Today's podcast is brought to you by Blue Canary. The bird has landed on beautiful Bainbridge Island, conveniently located at 499 Madison Avenue. ASE Master Technician Clint Ramsey brings over 15 years of experience, award-winning diagnostic skill, and a desire to reinvent the automotive repair experience. Schedule an appointment online at bluecanary.biz or call them today at 206-451-4220. I got something for your mind, body, and soul. I got something for your mind, body, and soul.
You have found the B.I.STANDER Podcast. Now here's your host with the most, Tiny Tim.
What's good, Podcastville? You found the B.I.STANDER Podcast. I am your host, Tiny Tim, the Mr. Rogers of podcasting, a.k.a. the King of Casual. Happy generic time of day to you. Shout out to Blue Canary. Thank you for your sponsorship. Go visit them at their new Bremerton location. Also, shout out to Sound Reprographics in the Pavilion. Thank you for your support. Today on the podcast, we welcome the Island Larder, Erik Peterson. How you doing?
I'm great. Nice to meet you.
Nice to make your acquaintance, too. First off, what is a larder? Is that, if I remember correctly, is that some type of place where you put tools as a chef?
It's actually a place to store food. It predates refrigeration. And so the larder was a location typically in the cellar, any place that was cooler than the kitchen and dark. And you could maintain fats and
root vegetables
and a place where food will keep for longer when it's not exposed to light and higher temperatures. And food will actually keep better. A lot of foods store better in temperatures that aren't quite as cold as our refrigerators. Mm-hmm. So that's what a larder is. When I was starting the business, I was kind of knocking that name around with people, and it turned some people off because it makes them think of lard and fat, animal fat, and but there has also been a resurgence of interest in the idea and the function of a larder. It's been popularized somewhat over the last 10, 15 years in the culinary world.
Yeah, our pantry seems to stay a lot colder than the rest of the kitchen, which is nice. So
yeah, perfect.
Like sparkling water seems to be stored there, and that's a good spot for it. Mm-hmm. It's a little cooler. We have our root vegetables in there and such, but I've seen people that have wine cellars and root cellars and stuff like that still. And I was listening to a story about Lewis and Clark yesterday, how they were curing meat on the trail and taking the salt out of water and boiling it and rubbing it into the meats and curing them.
Yeah.
It was pretty fascinating.
It is fascinating. I mean, a lot of the what we think of as finer foods today were just ways of keeping foods from rotting back before electricity and refrigeration. So prosciuttos and smoked meats and salamis and such things.
And it's kind of weird too that peasant food like lobster, bottom of the water, and pizza, we're peasants, and now that's some of the most expensive food around in a lot of places.
There's a lot that's weird about our times.
Yeah. I could talk food forever, and I hope we can get into that. I know you want to talk about some other things, but
I love talking about food.
I've tried to be a vegan. I've tried to be a vegetarian. I have been a pescatarian the majority of my life, but now I'm a flexitarian.
What's that?
I'm a little flexible. If I'm hungry, I might eat that. But sustainable fish, I mean, I think of Earth and Ocean a lot, and I'm trying. Last year's goal of mine wasn't a diet or lose weight or anything like that. It was to figure out the sourcing of everything I ate, everything I bought, where'd it come from, how did it get to me. And it's kind of ironic that the supply chain also crashed. So now I have an even more vested interest in like American manufacturing. Where do we get certain materials, and why it's difficult to harvest something here and not there. Like, of course, gosh, there's so many things running through my head. Prawns, almonds, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm a huge coconut guy. I know I can't grow coconut trees in my patch at Johnson's Farm there, where I have a plot. So, yes, I have to import certain types of food. But does that food come to me at what cost? Is it slave labor? Is it deforesting a certain area? Is it spreading certain disease? Like, I think bananas are now extinct, even though we joke about them every time there's no bananas at the store and such. We have this crop planting of bananas a certain way in a certain environment, and then a certain section of those bananas have become diseased, and there's no stopping the spread throughout the bananas. At a certain point, they're going to be completely gone. And until scientists can figure out how to, a lot of people don't like GMOs, but we have to genetically modify bananas if we want to have them again, because it's not a plant that grows off roots or seeds and such.
You know more about bananas than I do.
I like bananas. I think they're important.
I like bananas too. And I know it's one of those controversial foods because there's been a lot of issues with how they're grown, how they're harvested.
Yeah, and there's alternative milk with the pressure on the almond farms, and they grow in really hot climates, and then we need to water source those things.
Yeah.
And they take a lot of water. And then I don't know if you know what an almond looks like on the tree versus an almond in your hand. It's much different. It's highly processed.
Yeah.
So almond milk was probably my first alternative milk.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, no. And almonds, the healthy snack, and all the, hey, let's chase the superfood. It's chia this year. It's flax next year. It's almonds. Right now it's oat milk, right?
Yeah.
It puts huge strains on a single industry.
Right.
As opposed to saying, hey, let's eat the rainbow. Let's eat local.
Yeah.
Let's grow some of our own food. I'm a big fan. I forget this guy's name, but he produces 30,000 pounds of vegetables on a 1 acre lot in the city. And he has this old hydro thing, which blows me away that we can't have rain barrels here on Bainbridge Island. We cannot legally harvest the rainwater.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. But they can in California. And this guy has just, taken old windows and stuff, made planting sections, and recycles the water, the soil, the compost, the vermiculture, all that stuff. And he produces enough food to feed his entire block.
Wow.
Throughout the whole year.
Yeah.
And he gives out these little tips once a week.
Yeah.
Old timer.
Yeah.
Real cool.
I mean, there's so many things that we can do once we get focused on what the problems are and how to solve them, and do things that are outside of the norm of consumption.
And consumerism.
Yeah.
It's easy to just go to Walmart. It's the cheapest. They found it for me. I didn't have to climb a tree to pick up that banana.
Yeah. Which is, that's how most of us operate, is just going through the motions on that. So it's terrific that you're like taking time to research and think about and reflect on what it is that you're consuming and where it's coming from. It can become overwhelming quickly.
For sure. Like, I used to love the Chinese barbecue pork with the hot mustard and the sesame seeds. Loved it. You know, I'm a dog guy, right? Well, then I find out that pigs have pretty much the same emotional intelligence as a dog.
Yeah.
And I saw a massive slaughter of pigs, and most of these pigs didn't want to follow direction and were screaming for their lives to get the hell out of there. They saw the first pig go down, and they're like, hell no, this is not a good spot. And it just broke my heart. And I was just like, okay. Then you see those little pot-bellied pigs in people's house. They're not as popular anymore.
Right.
But they used to be. But a pig, and we had pigs. I grew up semi off the grid and slaughtering animals and plucking chickens and growing acres and acres of food and keeping our refrigeration in the crick as opposed to having a refrigerator and electricity and stuff like that. So I've seen it, and I think people would eat differently if they saw the sourcing or was in charge of the sourcing. Like, if you like a pork chop, go kill that pig.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, you've led a very different life than most Americans. And so your relationship to food is very different. I haven't ever been in an industrial pig farm. I don't have any desire to be there. I did participate in the slaughtering and butchering of friends' pigs who was raising like a dozen pigs at a time. And there was a group of maybe 6 of us who spent a weekend together doing that. And it was a first-time thing for most of us. And a big learning experience. And there was a horrible incident of one pig not going down and having to chase that around. And, it's one of those things that if you do consume meat, like, and you're going to be mindful about it, there's work to do about how it is that you can maintain a peaceful
existence. Yeah. I mean, I think of the wild boar problem, in Florida, and I think there's a couple other places where they're actually paying people to eradicate them. They're like rats, but they're also 800-pound vicious attack pigs. If those need to go down for population and environment and the safety of, I could eat that pig, right? It doesn't have the same idea as I go out, I feed this pig every day. It knows me. It's friendly with me. Hey, thanks again for the food. Appreciate you. See you tomorrow. And provide them food and shelter. And then one day I got to slit their throat. It's a different story. I feel like I have misled that animal for a long time. I've just continued to feed them for my own gain, right? So, yeah, I'm more into the wild game, I think. In certain situations. I mean, I'm not going to eat a bald eagle, but wild boar maybe.
Yeah, I've thought of similar things with high density of deer populations in some areas around here, and how do people deal with that? And I haven't heard about how management of deer population is conducted.
Oh, check with the coyotes.
Yeah, right, right. I have heard of the coyotes going.
They're also regulating the cat population.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but yeah, no. There's a lot of lessons available there, and I think it would be really a cool thing for communities to start to address that in direct ways, and how do we live with animals? How do we consume animals? And I'm not a vegetarian. I've never been inclined to become a vegetarian. It's I tend to be somebody who is absorbed with how things taste and look and feel in our bodies, and I am always interested in learning more about where our foods come from. But in terms of how my conscience processes where stuff comes from, there's a mix of complications that are there's a degree of not being able to deal with all of that, and I need to just be able to live and
eat and be happy.
Yeah. And at the same time, not completely closing off new information and developing sensitivities, and all that stuff is important.
Mm-hmm.
But I, in terms of adopting any kind of all-encompassing philosophy towards one thing,
thus the Flexitarian Diet.
Right. Which I have been the Flexitarian probably most of my life.
Yes.
And over the last couple of years, I've been developing more mindfulness, and I think there's a lot to be said for intuitive eating is one way that's described. But there's intuitive eating with an awareness of our own health and the awareness of community health as well.
So let me ask you this. Do you eat for taste or nutrition value?
For me, it's both. It really is both. There's the nutrition and taste can definitely be hand in hand. And
like not everybody loves Brussels sprouts.
Not everybody loves Brussels sprouts. So one of the things that I find continually compelling as a practice and an idea is approaching food, and not just food, but many aspects to life of not being focused on preference, like not tasting things and deciding I don't like that or I do that.
I'll make my kid take a bite of everything.
Yeah.
You can't pre-decide without tasting it.
And to be able to like experience what something is doing inside of your mouth, or as you look at it or smell it, and to start to develop a
relationship with it. And it is somewhat visual,
Very visual, yeah. That's one of the things I love about cooking is it's a full sensory art form.
I saw a picture on your website about a salmon steak, but it had blackberry on it.
Yeah.
And I'm a big forager.
Mm-hmm.
Let's forage on this island. Mm-hmm. Let's get the mushrooms. Let's catch the crabs. Let's boil the nettles, all that stuff. Have an edible landscape, huckleberries, raspberries, strawberries, figs, all that in my yard, no grass. My pro tip to people is you plate it so it looks nice, one. So there, and you have the visual. You have the aroma from the heat and the spice and whatever ingredients that you've put in it. You take a big whiff of that. Then that first bite should be the best bite.
Mm.
You put whatever looks the best piece of meat, fish, vegetable with the most butter on it, whatever you're inclined to do, and chew that slowly and just let that enjoy in your mouth. Mm-hmm. And that sets you up for the entire rest of the meal.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you're sipping wine, that you would inhale it. You would look at it and inhale it, and before you put it into your mouth, and then it's like your body is starting to prepare for that. Yeah,
it's kind of like when you see a pickle jar. You get that little tingle under your tongue, right? Yeah. Do you get that?
Yeah. So like the
little sour pucker.
Right. No, for sure.
Yeah. So you're anticipating that pickle, right?
Yeah.
So back to that salmon that I saw on your page. I used to work at a French restaurant called Le Test Vin, and we had a free meal every shift. And it was funny because like half the crew would go over to Dick's across the street on Queen Anne and eat there and pay for it. And I'd be like, no, Jacques hooked me up with the salmon, and he made this Blackberry sauce. And it was so decadent, and I have not seen it since, nor did he give me any recipes. But I remember that being my favorite meal at that restaurant. And then I saw your picture, and I was like, that's pretty similar.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So is that Blackberry sauce like a reduction of some sort? And what's added to it?
Well, I've used that in a couple of different ways. So the blackberries, I also like to forage for blackberries here, and there's so much to do with them.
First thing you do is put them on parchment paper, spread them out, freeze them for 15 minutes, then put them in the bag, then they don't stick together. Another pro tip.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Smoothies all year long.
I think I macerated some of those blackberries and...
I'm sorry. Macerated?
Yeah.
Is that another word for picked some blackberries?
No, that's where you put some sugar in, and the sugars cause the blackberries to break down. And it's another like preservation method where you're not like making a jam. There's no cooking, but that the sugars will help to preserve the berries from developing molds. And then to that, adding some vinegar, and there was probably an herb or something that I mix into that.
Yeah, I think parsley was in there.
For that salmon, what I was doing was putting prepping the salmon with like a dry rub of dried fennel and probably a little chili. And then laying over the blackberry mixture and grilling it. And then after it's finished, finishing it with a lot of fresh chopped parsley and dill that had been dressed in a little olive oil and garlic and kind of making a salad over the top of it, and then fresh blackberries on top of that. And
they look good.
Yeah, it's a really impressive looking plate.
Very colorful.
Yeah.
If you can char the outside of the salmon too, you get a little texture change.
Yeah.
So you teach cooking techniques, correct?
I have done some teaching. I'm scheduled to do some classes here at Barn using fresh kelp.
With Marcos Scheer?
Marcos and his wife Hillary are going to be a part of that. And
Marcos has been on the podcast. He's coming back here shortly. Back to pigs, and cows. If we were to feed them a kelp product into their diet, that would remove the methane gas. That blows me away.
It's very cool.
Kelp is the future, people.
Kelp is a future.
So what are you going to make with the kelp?
Well, we have 3 classes scheduled. First class is dedicated to baking and roasting with kelp. Second class is dedicated to stovetop work with kelp. And third class is fresh preparations with kelp. And the first class is we're going to make a baked pasta and squash dish that will include kelp and spinach into that mix, and it all goes into a springform pan, bakes for a long time, and the baking will have to occur at home because it takes too long to do it in the class. And it's really a way of trying to introduce how an ingredient like kelp can be incorporated into familiar type dishes without dominating the flavor. it becomes a source for an umami, savory kind of background flavor. And then another dish we're making is what I'm calling Kelp Rolls, as opposed to like cabbage, inspired by like Germanic cabbage, stuffed cabbage rolls, but using fresh kelp and stuffing it with minced shrimp and roasted mushrooms, and rolling it up and then putting it in a very hot oven. One of the cool discoveries of fresh kelp for me was like how well it roasts. Very quickly turns into a nice crispy with a little bit of a chew quality to it. And you can wrap vegetables in it and it will adhere to itself and so hold a shape very nicely. That was really exciting, because fresh kelp is a fairly new ingredient for me to work with.
Yeah, for sure.
So the baked pasta dish, the stuffed kelp roll, and roasted kelp chips rubbed with chili and garlic. That's what we're making in the first class.
Yeah, we have fresh kale chips at home all the time.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Kale spreads like crazy.
Yeah.
You said shrimp. It's been a trigger for me this week. First off, what's the difference between a prawn and a shrimp?
I believe it's just the size. Like prawns are a larger version of shrimp, and there are different breeds, which I am not intelligent enough to be able to tell you what those are. So
where are you getting your shrimp?
So the shrimp for the class is Oregon
bay shrimp.
Yeah, and very small,
like a shrimp cocktail shrimp.
Yeah. It's a product you can buy through Town and Country or Central Market. It's not cheap, and price is one of the issues for the classes that I've been offering. Like my ingredients tend to be more expensive.
So you gotta get these guys to forage everything, then bring it back into the kitchen next door here.
Yeah, I imagine if we were out all foraging, like what that would be like.
Yeah, it'd be a fight for the chanterelles, I tell you.
Marcos's kelp product, I think, is really interesting, and I'm glad to know him and what he's doing.
Fantastic guy.
That as a potential future common ingredient for us, I think is really cool.
I see it in lasagnas and chowders mostly.
Yeah, and if you look online, people will often say, "Oh, I made a pesto with my kelp instead of basil," and that always kind of makes me recoil a little bit.
Yeah, you should be doing that with your nettles.
You should be. I mean, I like the idea of treating kelp like as the unique ingredient that it is, and developing foods that work really well with it, as opposed to like trying to replace ingredients that we're familiar with and with the kelp. And it feels more like a marketing switch as opposed to like respecting the ingredient and developing flavors that work well with it. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but
for you listeners out there, check out a previous episode called Sea Grove Kelp. Marcos farms kelp in Alaska. Like he has a nursery underwater. It's a fascinating business. And kelp is a bonding agent in pharmaceuticals and has a lot of different proprietary use that just hasn't been discovered yet. And
plastics. You can develop plastics with it.
Because we need more plastic.
We need more plastics that aren't petroleum derived.
Right. And there's just endless ideas for kelp. And I think Marcos is number one in the industry in discovering that type of stuff and way ahead of the curve.
There's There's another guy, Stephen Shear, who works with Kelp on Bainbridge, who has been harvesting kelp that is raised along with native oysters in the Puget Sound through the Puget Sound Restoration. And he started a little business drying his kelp and mixing seasonings into it, sells it at the farmer's market.
Like jerky or something?
No, more of grinding the kelp once it's dry so it's more of a powder form, and then mixing it with other herbs and spices so that you can use it as a mixed seasoning.
Oh, seasoning.
Yeah.
I wonder what it would be like if you could make some type of tea out of it as well.
I don't know. It'd be like drinking the Puget, going for a swim and drinking the Puget Sound.
Shout out to the sewage spill.
I used some kelp in a dish that I made for the Bainbridge Arts and Crafts fundraiser this past summer, where I used blackberries that had foraged and clams from the Suquamish seafood and kelp from Marcos, and did a steaming and plating that turned out very beautiful as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to hit back on shrimp real quick. Prawns, mostly. There's not the same type of regulation of following the sourcing like there is for fish with prawns. And most of the stuff comes deveined in the store and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. The majority of those prawns and stuff are harvested by slave labor. And there's even small captive people on islands. All they do is work 10 hours deveining prawns for us. And we have no idea if it came from a reliable source or not in a lot of ways. So last week I gave up eating prawns for more sustainable, ocean life and, just workforce. I don't want to buy, it kind of makes me sick, but I forget about it quite often about my iPhone, and how people are just the human rights of the workers that are working on that iPhone. I want to see manufacturing where we're building stuff here and paying honest living wage. Mm-hmm. And we don't have to, it's just like the mask, the supply chain, because we didn't make our own masks here in the United States. Now 2 years later in the pandemic, we're getting mailed a free mask. Well, thank you. What about the X amount of people that have already passed on? It's a little too late, but those manufacturing and harvesting scenarios have to improve, and they have to be local. And anytime we can harvest food right here on the island or quickly source, I like to get oysters at Hama Hama and other places in the Olympic Peninsula, Chimicum corner stores. One of my favorite places to go. There's different elements for your soil and such. It's important to know where your food's coming from. But I'm sad that I'm missing prawns.
Yeah.
One of my favorite foods.
Well, keep doing some investigating and see if you could find something that isn't slave labor.
Yeah. Don't shop at Slaveway, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Cost of things is
Yeah, I saw that Morgan Spurlock documentary on YouTube about the chicken farming.
No, I didn't see that.
I'm almost off chicken too. It's disgusting.
I believe it.
We've bastardized chickens to have maximum growth in 8 weeks and then just die.
Yeah.
And they can have cancer and heart attack or whatever, and they just throw that food into the pile and ship it off to us,
Gruesome.
Totally. And I saw some short documentary on Fairlife, the milk farmers too. And I thought this was illegal that you could go in and undercover and film the conditions on these farms. I believe they made that illegal, some type of whistleblowing law. But somebody brought out some footage, and cows are being treated really, really poorly at Fairlife. And the marketing, you see it. Well, let's take Rite Aid for example. It's now earth tones. It's green and brown, and everybody's using these words like sustainability
right.
and green and clean, and I don't know. I feel like the marketing is kind of taken over, and the packaging too. It's just we need to buy volume. I don't know, Whole Foods basically. We need to be able to bring our own canisters in there and scoop up our chia seeds or whatever. TNC does a great job that way, and
kinda.
And they grow some of their own food and put it in the store, but the individual packaging, the plastic, and where's our recycling go on this island?
Not.
I don't know.
Not very far. There's not much. I mean, Diane Landry, I think is her name.
Yeah, zero waster.
She's the guru of recycling. In my mind, if you have a question, you should have her on and interview her.
I know how insane that would be. I'm starting to see problems all over. I know she's capsulized every problem and can pontificate on it for a long time.
Yeah. The use of plastics is just grown and grown, and over the course of the pandemic, it's become worse. I know sourcing for compostable plastics has really fallen by the wayside or become impossible. And
you got to run them through the dishwasher before they're going to recycle them. It's got to be spotless plastic.
Yeah, and most plastics aren't recyclable with our industry. There just isn't a recycling industry in America.
They lose money.
Yeah. That could all be changed if our values shifted and we forced it.
Well, I was just down in Oregon last week, and I noticed a lot of homeless people were turning in bottles and cans because they have a deposit thing. Just like my wife's from New York, so when we go back there, I always have to take her mother's recyclables to the store, and there's a chute, bottles, cans, and you get 3 cents, 4 cents. It's just like the good milk at TNC. They charge you $2 to take the glass bottle, and then give you $2 when you come back or return it.
Right.
That's a system that works.
Yeah.
Our recycling, there's no incentive. There's no incentive for me to sort and clean and do all that, because the glass, the plastics, the paper, they all go in the same bin. And then that bin gets shipped to who knows where.
Yeah.
And then majority of that stuff gets thrown in the landfill anyway.
Yeah.
We just put it in a blue container and feel good about ourselves.
Yeah. The responsibility on recycling plastics needs to shift from consumer to producer. Producers need to be responsible for setting up where the disposable plastics go to.
I don't buy plastic drinks anymore. The water I get is in aluminum now. And if I want to get some special drink, it's got to be in glass. Otherwise, I'm going to use my power of purchase and just keep it moving.
Yeah.
I know you got some deeper thoughts. I'm trying to draw them out of you here.
I think working on both of our own actions is great, but it's not going to make a big difference. It's the industries that need to change. Yeah. And
so how do you pressure those industries to change?
Government needs to pressure those industries.
Well, I don't want to get into government.
Unfortunately, our government isn't in a very productive place, but it really does need to put pressure on industry in order to implement change. From a consumer's standpoint, we're too easily manipulated by the industries themselves.
Yeah, I feel this feel-good story about e-vehicles. It's still taking tremendous amount of electricity. The batteries, there's only X amount of lithium, I guess, and it's harvested mostly in third world countries to the detriment of the people that live there. And it also destroys land, by harvesting that lithium, if I'm corrected with this at all. This is all hearsay, and on the Bystander, we don't fact check. So, yeah, I don't want to use gas. But then a whole new set of problems come when I use my lithium battery for my phone, my Tesla, my charging station, whatever.
Yeah. There's no perfectly clean living, and we can't be Puritans.
Flintstones did it. Scoot around on 2 feet.
Yeah. Fantasy life can be perfectly pure.
Well, that's why the metaverse is going to crush, because everybody can go be their idealistic self or the inner bastard that they really are.
I don't know what that is.
The metaverse?
Yeah.
It's a virtual reality that Facebook is now for building with non-fungible tokens and cryptocurrency.
Oh.
And it's been putting the financial world upside down and buying these different things that will relate to the metaverse.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you the kids of this world will know it as something that's going to be highly addictive, and they're going to take in my thought process, they're going to take their life and then go move over to the metaverse, which is a non-consequential life. And then they're going to lose life skills in the real world. I don't know. You familiar with the book Ready Player One at all?
I am familiar. It's not something I read.
I think it's similar to that concept. I don't want to get distracted on metaverse too much. I want to talk about food, art. You're quite the artist too.
Well, it's those issues that are without physical reality, I find create anxiety in me, and I think in others. Mm-hmm. And for me, one of the ways that I try to maintain some sense of mental health and physical health is being more focused on the visceral, tangible parts of life. Mm-hmm. And
that's what being mindful is about. Breathe the air, hear the birds chirp.
Visual art for me was something that became important when I was about 13, and to some extent has stayed important with me to today. And
so you have one medium is cooking, and that's, I think, an artistic endeavor for sure.
Yeah,
in my mind. Would you agree?
It certainly can be.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean.
Yeah, if you're making a pot of white rice, that ain't too artistic, but I get it.
It's your relationship to it.
Yeah.
In a way, and how it impacts others. I'm
sorry to cut you off. I get so much joy of putting down a attractive plate for my family, and they're like, this smells good, or, oh, this looks fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
That 2-second of gratification is so fulfilling.
Yeah, super fulfilling. Yeah. And it's one of the things I love about my business is that I'm able to make food for others that isn't just in a restaurant where it's like an industrial project of like, I'm in the back producing food that's delicious and beautiful, but I don't have any connection with the people consuming it. That's one of the things I really love about the personal chef work is that I have an awareness of them and how it's impacting them.
Yeah, when their eyes roll back and they're, that's gratifying.
Or over time. I mean, you mentioned that you're a stay-at-home father, mm-hmm. and that making food is important for you and your son and your wife, and mm-hmm. and that's I don't have any children. It's something that I have missed in my life, and I relate in some way to clients as a part of my family.
Mm-hmm. I get that.
And so there's a true expression of love that happens through food, and any good cook knows that to be true. And with visual art, it's very different. And
what's your medium? Oils?
I'm not painting. I haven't been painting for the last couple of years. But I spent 25 years very focused on painting with oils, painting with acrylics, doing a lot of drawing, collage work, and it was a daily committed practice. And
cool.
And I went through, I have 2 undergraduate degrees and a master's degree in fine arts, and taught at colleges and showed in galleries and such, all that stuff. And
why do you think you don't paint anymore?
There, for many different reasons, but one of them was the isolation of it. You spend a lot of time by yourself, and for many years that was important to me, but it became something that was detrimental to my own health.
Yeah, I had a period like that too. It was a really extended period where I would just go off and walk in the Grand Forest for hours and hours and on beaches and just be in my own head. And it turned out that I wasn't practicing mindfulness. I was avoiding people and communication.
Yeah.
It's a big reason why I started this too.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a better communicator.
Yeah. Like this, what you're doing would be, in my mind, an art form.
Yeah, let's hope it gets some respect at some point. I'm going starting year 5 here in February, and it should kick in at some point.
Yeah.
Anybody out there?
Oh, they're out there. Yeah. I hope you get more and more listeners.
Thank you.
But I think also
be a friend, tell a friend.
the idea of growth and expansion as creating more value, I question. Like, that's one of those things, those American tales that are told to us. Like, I also think that staying very small, but also maintaining that strong, clear, loving connection, that's the important thing. And that doesn't get enough value placed on it, as opposed to the number of likes that you might get, or the amount of attention, or the amount of money. There's so many things about our society that we're told is valuable, which is really the most destructive aspects of our society.
Like sports and having the cool car and the cool clothes
and big technology and social media. These things that are making everybody a lot of money are the most destructive parts. There's one of the things during the pandemic that we learned we were told about essential workers, and the hypocrisy of being called an essential worker, and also recognizing that some of the lowest paid workers are your essential workers.
Yeah.
That there's so much that has happened over the last couple of years that have big teaching opportunities that I'm afraid are just passing us by.
Well, let's start with teachers.
Teachers, yeah.
When the pandemic first hit, it was like get to work or get fired, and the majority of the teachers were 50 years plus, so they were in that demographic of catching it, but yet we didn't have a vaccine yet, and they were ordering them to go back, and it was like it wasn't safe, and then we don't have a backup system of additional teachers to fill those holes. Mm-hmm. It was quite the show. And you think about it, like Travis Kelce of the Chiefs gets a $100 million contract, right? That teacher is almost on strike every year to get a decent contract, just as a living wage. And who brings more value to you, that teacher or that football player?
Yeah.
Thankfully, he's on my fantasy football team, so he brings me a lot of pleasure. But I would gladly pay more for my teacher to teach my child. And I have in certain situations where the educator is not up to the speed of my son, or the curriculum doesn't allow him to continue forward, so I have to go seek out other alternatives to keep him engaged and going forward. And I think about that in sports on this island sometimes. By the age of 12 or so, you're basically getting coaches that are just going to repeat the curriculum for the next 6 years until they're into college, because we don't have a supply of really well-trained coaches and mentors, and then coaches coming into that. And then we have a situation where we have limited participants. So every sport, football, lacrosse, soccer, are all vying for the same 11 kids that are sitting in that 5th grade classroom or whatever.
Yeah.
And one kid's like, I love lacrosse. Let's all play the lacrosse. And it's over, right?
The role of mentorship and teacher, like, it would be something that could become so much more robust in our communities. And it's something that we devalue, which is obvious in the rates of pay that are offered to teachers. But also ideas about if you can't do something, if you can't be successful in something, you become a teacher in it.
If you can't play a sport, coach it.
That it's a default position, as opposed to something to work towards, I think there's so many great opportunities there, and things like podcasting present opportunities for teaching. Or
at least discovery. I think sometimes, does a kid need to go to college or spend some time on YouTube learning how to, shimmy a door, change your oil, because all that information's out there, right? And it's free. And you don't have to take a student loan and be indebted and get hazed on a campus and stuff like that.
Right.
If you want to build with your hands, woodworking, there's X amount. If you want to work in the financial district, here's how you make money.
Yeah. When I was learning about art, I was learning about materials and techniques, but also I was learning about history and philosophy, and I loved that. Like, I loved learning all of that stuff. And to me, it was just that I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I didn't see any other opportunity to learn without going through college degrees. And college degrees are very expensive, and income from art is not there. And so it feels like a way that's also a kind of a destructive thing within our society, where we don't have the opportunity to learn from artists without going through these institutions, which are expensive. That I have friends who have avoided that to a degree by connecting with practicing artists, but it's very hodgepodge, and you don't get a very robust education. And that's always something that I felt like would be a great thing to develop in our world, is just ways to teach young artists, give young artists opportunities to learn without having to go into student loans.
Yeah, before I ever painted a picture or drew a picture with any knowledge, let's say, or techniques, it was art history class that made me excited about learning how to paint, learning about Dali and Chagall and Picasso and the times that they lived in. And Picasso would scribble some shit on a piece of paper and say, hey, trade you this for a pack of cigarettes. He was very prolific, and a lot of his stuff was just nonsense. But in a lot of ways, his technique was just one of the best. It's all how you see it.
Yeah. I mean, some people are somehow gifted with two-dimensional techniques that the rest of us could never come to.
Oh, shit. Did you see that savant that went in a helicopter around Notre Dame? Took one trip around it and then drew it to scale. There was like 1/8 of a window or something, and there's just hundreds and hundreds of windows and sculpture. He visually memorized the whole cityscape, had never visited it, took a 15-minute helicopter ride and drew it to scale. Unbelievable.
Yeah, something's going on in that mind that doesn't happen in my mind.
No, not at all. So who's some of your influences and favorite artists?
There's been many over the years. I've been drawn to expressive artists like Max Beckmann. There was a long period of time in which abstract work like Mark Rothko and Mondrian were very important to me. Some of the last artists I was looking at were more figurative. Peter Doig and Carl Veit. That over the course of the years, I found myself engaged in ideas as much as material practices, and through material practices, I was working through ideas that I would pick up through other works of art that I'd looked at. With Mondrian, it was dynamic equilibrium, the grids that he created, which he's become famous for, and you can get printed on things, and they don't have expressive content to them, but there's when you are in front of them in actual the paintings that he made, you see how he was working with physical material and responding to it in an intuitive way. It's just that he had created these systems which were intended to kind of keep his hand out of it and to tap into something that was I want to say more spiritual, universal, but the process of looking at like Mondrian, you start to see how the influence of a patch of color has a weight and an energy to it that is countered by the width of a black line. And even though you're looking at a painting that isn't physically moving, your relationship to it
is dimensional.
It's dimensional, and it's moving. That there is a dynamism that happens, and
very cool.
That I just the other day, even though I haven't been painting or looking at paintings directly, the idea of dynamic equilibrium was something that popped into my mind, and I Googled it, and there's that's something in chemistry that is studied where you have what appears to be a static situation, but that the appearance of non-movement is deceptive because there's a steady exchange of chemical interactions happening that create equilibrium. And so it appears to not be changing, but it's because there's a constant flow back and forth. And that there is something about looking at paintings that for me felt like that was happening. Like there's systems in paintings, like really good paintings, systems in paintings that have energy, and then there's systems within me, and we're looking at each other and
kind of give and take relationship.
Yeah. And so like to me, like it opened my conception of like pantheism as a spiritual reality. That something like this table could have a spiritual existence, and
not this table.
That
some IKEA knockoff.
we're a part of systems that are not obvious to us, but that given the opportunity, and we can tap into access in different ways. That creates I don't know, like a responsibility, but also like a peacefulness that I experience.
When was the last time you went to a free First Friday art walk?
I can't stand them.
Really?
Yeah.
I kind of like them.
Art walks in general, like regardless of where it is, they become more of social scenes as opposed to opportunities to view art.
Well, I also feel like artists should be there too, or the representatives should be there.
Oftentimes they are.
And say, hey, you know, what do you see there?
Yeah. I mean, engaging with people about art is something I enjoyed when I was teaching it. And sometimes it was enjoyable when I was exhibiting it. But it's also, you spend a lot of time as an artist developing something.
Yep.
And you put it out there into the world.
It has an extreme value to you.
It has a value to you, but you can't like marry yourself to that value. Like you have to like cut it out and let it be free for other people to experience.
Last year I did my first show at Meadowmere when they did the remodel at the golf course there. And I had, I think, 23 pieces up or whatever. And then I started hanging out there, having lunch, you know, and then people would be, oh, look at that. That's just gorgeous, you know, and I'd just be sucking it up. And then I'd be like, I go back there for lunch, you know, and I was thinking about how much I spent, you know, getting everything up in massive frames and hanging it. And then every lunch I bought to feel that dopamine rush of, hey, that's pretty good. And then, one time this one lady was like, oh, I know the artist. And she called me over to the table and all these old ladies were, oh, it's great. It's so nice to meet you. Sit down, have a drink, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sucking that up. And that was up for 30 days. Didn't get a single phone call. Didn't sell a single piece. And then wound up dispersing most of that art to other businesses.
Yeah.
And put a little tag there, you know, art by Timothy Self. And still, not a single call.
Yeah.
And I feel you about that time, the money, the return. It's all horrible.
It's got to be coming from some other place in order for you to produce it.
Yeah, you got to do it for yourself. And art, I think, too many people look at it as an investment as opposed to a piece that they would really enjoy in their home.
Yeah, and it's funny, you know, it's one of the things like I can make food and it sells like crazy. Mm-hmm. People will spend money on food, no problem. Spending money on art is like a rarity. Like, I mean, if you think about yourself and how much money you've spent on original art in your life versus food, it's going to be a vast difference.
Yeah. And I feel like I can't afford art because I got to buy food, right?
Yeah. I mean, I bought an original painting last year during the pandemic, and it was the first time in a long time that I've bought a piece of art. Mm-hmm. And but it's something I will have the rest of my life. And it's hugely valuable to me, and it was a valuable thing to the artist. And it's something that I think feels very foreign to most Americans, to buy art. Like that's something that you just don't do. You might buy posters, reproductions of art, but I think there's so much intimidation around art for most Americans that it doesn't really enter into their reality. Mm-hmm. Whether it's the intimidation of cost, but I think it's largely the intimidation of culture. And
I got another reason.
Yeah.
We have cathedral ceilings 14 feet high, huge barren walls.
Cool.
All kinds of room for art.
Yeah.
Nothing on the walls in 10 years.
Why?
because I have a kid that juggles a soccer ball in the house.
Oh, yeah.
And bounces the basketball.
Yeah.
And we got dogs, and just it's chaos. And I just see something flying off the wall. Every day I'm like, the TV is going to go any day now. He's hit it way too many times.
Yeah.
But I think later on, I'll have some stuff up for sure. And I went to in Times Square, not recently, but probably 2 years ago. And this artist was all about crows. And I think crows are fascinating, intelligent birds that have a lot for us to discover still. But he was mixed medium with paper mache, chicken coop wire, and acrylics. So there was a motion of a wing or a cheek or something about the bird that he would have dimensionally brought up with wire or paper mache with the black acrylic over it in different areas. And then the crows were set in uncomfortable human positions, basically like being in a dungeon, or being handcuffed, with your wings up and stuff like that. And it was all this mixed medium. And I was like, that stuff is super impressive to me because it almost looks like the bird is ready to fly off the painting. So I could walk by that every day and be like, whoa, is the bird looking at me? Was it about to make a move on me? Something like that.
The realism.
Yeah. So it was a show that moved me, because mentally my mind was playing games on me. It's kind of like negative space. When they say, what do you see there? Oh, black spot. Well, if you look at the white section, this is a tiger, a monkey, and, Toucan Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that type of stuff.
Yeah.
We got to wrap it up right here pretty soon, but I'd like to open this up. Anything else you want to get into, or should we have a part 2 here soon?
Well, perhaps we should have a part 2. There's a lot that we could talk about.
What's on your mind right now? What's really sticking out in your head?
Well, for me, opportunities to communicate publicly, like there were so many issues that came up during summer of 2020, during the year of 2020, with regards to race, and that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. And
I'm willing to sit down and extend this conversation if you would like to talk about race right now.
Yeah. It's something I would like to talk about.